First contact shock. High Admiral Xeris of the Galactic Confederacy watched the battle unfold through the massive viewport of his flagship, the Eternal Vigilance. His scaled fingers tapped impatiently against the command console as holographic displays showed the positions of hundreds of ships engaged in the largest space battle the galaxy had seen in centuries. Status report, he demanded, 4 of his 6 eyes narrowing as another Confederate cruiser winked out of existence, consumed by enemy fire. Not good, Admiral, his second-in-command, Sub-Commander Thela replied, her luminescent skin pulsing with anxiety. The Vrexian Alliance has deployed their new quantum disruptors. Our shields can't withstand more than 3 direct hits. We've lost 27 vessels in the last hour alone. Xeris hissed softly. The Vrexians had been their enemies for generations, but this latest technology threatened to tip the scales decisively. The battle for the Nexus Gateway, an ancient alien transportation hub that could instantly move fleets across the galaxy, had been raging for weeks. Whoever controlled it would dominate this sector for centuries to come. Reroute power from the secondary arrays. Tell the Third Fleet to maintain defensive formation Epsilon. We cannot lose this position. His orders were calm, measured, despite the gravity of their situation. The Confederacy had never faced such dire odds. The massive bridge, filled with officers of a dozen different species, hummed with tension as tactical officers barked orders and communication specialists coordinated with the rest of the fleet. The battle for the Nexus Gateway was the culmination of a 100-year Cold War that had finally erupted into full-scale conflict 3 years ago. Admiral, the sensor officer's voice cut through the organized chaos. Unknown spatial distortion detected near Sector 7. Vrexian reinforcements. Xeris demanded. Negative, sir. The signature doesn't match any known Vrexian technology. In fact, it doesn't match anything in our database. The main view screen shifted to show a section of space, seemingly tearing apart, reality itself twisting as something pushed through from elsewhere. The bridge fell silent as the anomaly grew, pulsing with energies that their sensors could barely comprehend. By the first stars, someone whispered. With a final, violent flash that temporarily overloaded their visual sensors, a vessel emerged from the rift, which sealed itself behind it. When the screen cleared, Xeris found himself staring at a ship unlike anything he had ever seen. Where Confederate vessels were elegant organic curves and Vrexian ships were crystalline geometric perfection, this newcomer was something entirely different. It was brutally functional, a dark gray hull bristling with what could only be weapons. Its design spoke of a mentality that valued effectiveness over aesthetics, power over grace. Size comparison. Xeris asked quietly. Approximately 1/3 the length of our flagship, Admiral, but mass readings suggest extremely dense construction. Their power signature is, sir, our sensors must be malfunctioning. These readings suggest energy output exceeding our most advanced dreadnoughts. Xeris' crest rose in alarm. Open a channel to Fleet Command. I want to know if anyone has any information about this vessel. Sir, the communications officer interrupted. We're receiving a transmission from the unknown ship. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. This can't be right. In over 300 distinct galactic languages. Put it through, Xeris ordered, straightening his uniform. The main holographic display flickered, and for the first time, Xeris found himself face to face with the ship's commander. The being that appeared was Bictal, with pinkish-brown skin covering its face and hands. It had only 2 eyes, a prominent nose, and wore some kind of structured uniform in dark blue with silver accents. Most striking was the complete lack of scales, feathers, or exoskeleton. Its skin appeared soft and vulnerable. This is Captain James Riker of the Earth vessel Horizon, the creature said, its voice surprisingly deep and resonant. We apologize for our unexpected arrival, but we detected your battle and felt it necessary to intervene before further loss of life occurred. The bridge erupted in murmurs. Earth, No spacefaring civilization by that name existed in Confederate records. Silence. Xeris commanded before addressing the alien captain. I am High Admiral Xeris of the Galactic Confederacy. Your presence in this contested space is unauthorized. Identify your species and explain your purpose here immediately. The alien's mouth curved upward at the corners, some kind of expression Xeris couldn't interpret. We are humans, Admiral. As for our purpose, the human paused, seeming to consider his words carefully. Let's just say we've been observing galactic affairs for some time. Your conflict has reached a point where we felt direct intervention was necessary. Observing. Xeris's secondary heart began beating faster. That's impossible. No uncontacted species could possess technology advanced enough to. He was interrupted by urgent alerts across the command deck. The tactical display showed the Vrexian fleet breaking formation, redirecting their focus away from the Confederate ships and toward the human vessel. Admiral, his tactical officer shouted, the Vrexians are powering up their main weapons arrays. They're targeting the Earth ship. Before Xeris could respond, the first Vrexian salvos streaked across space toward the human vessel. The bridge crew watched in stunned silence, expecting to witness the newcomer's destruction. Instead, the energy beams seemed to distort around the horizon, bending away harmlessly as if deflected by some invisible force. Fascinating, the human captain remarked calmly, as if discussing nothing more important than the weather. Their weapons technology has advanced considerably since our last observation. A new alert sounded, and the tactical display updated to show the human vessel's response. There was no visible beam, no projectile, just a wave of energy that expanded outward in a perfect sphere. When it touched the nearest Vrexian battlecruisers, their shields simply vanished. Their engines died. They drifted, suddenly powerless. What in the seven hells was that? Xeris demanded, his crest fully extended in shock. A targeted electromagnetic pulse, customized to their shield frequency, Captain Riker explained. Non-lethal, but it should keep them occupied for a while. Now, Admiral Xeris, I believe it's time for us to have a proper conversation. May I come aboard your vessel? There are matters of galactic security we need to discuss. Xeris looked around at his stunned bridge crew, then back at the human captain. In all his centuries of service, nothing had prepared him for this moment. First contact with a species that already seemed to know everything about them and possessed technology that made their most advanced weapons look primitive. Permission granted, Captain Riker, he finally said. But be advised, any hostile action will be met with the full force of the Confederate fleet. The human's expression changed again. That same upward curve of the mouth, revealing white, surprisingly blunt teeth. Understood, Admiral. And may I suggest a temporary ceasefire? I believe what I have to share will be of interest to both the Confederacy and the Vrexian Alliance. Before Xeris could respond, his second-in-command leaned close, voice barely above a whisper. Admiral, our long-range sensors are detecting more spatial distortions, identical to the one that brought the human ship. Xeris felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. How many? 7. No, 12. They keep appearing, sir. At current count, 23, and increasing. On the view screen, Captain Riker's expression turned serious. I should mention, Admiral, the Horizon is merely our diplomatic vessel. The rest of the fleet is arriving now. I suggest we move our discussion forward quickly. As Xeris watched the tactical display fill with new signatures, he realized that everything he thought he knew about the balance of power in the galaxy had just changed forever. Humanity had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same. Battle of the Nexus. The meeting chamber aboard the Eternal Vigilance had never hosted such an unusual gathering. At one end of the long obsidian table sat High Admiral Xeris, with his senior Confederate officers. At the other end, Supreme Commander Vilax of the Vrexian Alliance glowered with his crystalline eyes, flanked by his own advisors. And in the middle, seemingly unconcerned by the centuries of hatred that separated the two galactic powers, sat Captain James Riker and his executive officer, Commander Elena Cheng. "This is unprecedented," hissed Vilax, his translucent skin pulsing with angry red bioluminescence. "We were on the verge of victory when these humans interfered. Their actions are a direct violation of the neutral species protocols." "With respect, Commander," Riker replied calmly, "those protocols only apply to registered species within the galactic community. Earth has never signed those accords." "Because you've been hiding," Xeris interjected. "Our records show no contact with any civilization calling themselves humans or any system named Earth. Yet you speak our languages perfectly and possess technology that surpasses our own. Explain." Riker exchanged a glance with Commander Cheng, who nodded slightly. "The truth, gentlemen, is that humanity has been observing the galactic community for approximately 70 of our years, roughly 40 of your standard cycles. We discovered the remains of an ancient transit gate in our home system, similar to your Nexus gateway, but long dormant." "Impossible," one of the Phyrexian scientists objected. "The progenitor network has been mapped for millennia. No undiscovered gates exist." "And yet here we are," Riker said with a small smile. "We reversed engineered enough of the technology to understand its function, and more importantly, to intercept communications passing through the network. We've been listening, learning, and preparing." "Preparing for what?" Xeris asked, his crest rising with suspicion. "First contact, of course, but we were hoping for something a bit more peaceful." Riker's expression hardened. "Instead, we discovered two advanced civilizations locked in a war that threatens to destabilize an entire galactic sector. A war over technology you don't fully understand." Commander Cheng activated a small device, and a holographic projection appeared above the table, a complex, three-dimensional schematic of the Nexus gateway. "Your current understanding of the gateway is dangerously incomplete," she explained, her voice precise and authoritative. "It's not just a transportation hub. Based on our analysis of similar technology, the Nexus contains fail-safes designed to prevent misuse. Fail-safes that your battle has damaged." The hologram shifted, showing energy patterns flowing through the ancient structure, patterns that pulsed with increasing intensity and irregularity. "What we're seeing," Cheng continued, "is the early stages of a catastrophic overload. If the gateway's core destabilizes completely, the resulting explosion will render this entire star system uninhabitable and potentially create a cascading failure throughout the connected network." The room fell silent as both Confederate and Phyrexian officers studied the projection with growing horror. "How long?" Vilax finally asked, his hostility momentarily forgotten. "At current degradation rates, approximately 36 hours, Cheng answered. "Less if the battle continues to damage the outer containment structures." Xeris leaned forward, all six eyes focused intensely on the human captain. "And you expect us to believe that humans, a species unknown to the galactic community until today, happen to understand progenitor technology better than civilizations that have studied it for thousands of years?" "We don't claim to understand it fully," Riker replied, "but we've had the luxury of studying it without preconceptions. Your civilizations built your understanding on foundations laid by your ancestors, who themselves had limited information. We started fresh, asking questions your scientists haven't asked in generations." Before Xeris could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. His communication officer's voice came through the chamber's speakers with urgent clarity. "Admiral, multiple unidentified vessels have appeared near the gateway. They're not Phyrexian, Confederate, or human." The meeting room's display screen activated, showing grainy images of sleek, black ships emerging from what appeared to be subspace rifts directly adjacent to the ancient structure. Their design was unlike anything in known space, organic yet mechanical, with surfaces that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Scavengers," Vilax whispered, his crystalline features reflecting sudden fear. "You know these ships." Riker asked sharply. Not the ship specifically, Osiris answered, his voice grim. But we've encountered their kind before. They appear when civilizations are at their weakest, when we're distracted by our own conflicts. They take what they want and vanish back into the darkness between galaxies. They're attacking the gateway, the communications officer reported. Energy readings from the Nexus are becoming highly unstable. Riker stood abruptly. We need to act now. My fleet can provide cover while your engineers work to stabilize the gateway's core. And why would you help us? Vilax demanded, though with less conviction than before. Because if that gateway explodes, the shockwave will travel through the network, including to the dormant gate in our home system. Riker's eyes were hard as steel. We protect our own, Commander Vilax. Always. Within minutes, the impromptu war council had transformed into a joint operations center. Ancient enemies found themselves coordinating defense patterns, while human officers integrated seamlessly into their command structure, bringing fresh perspectives and technological solutions that neither the Confederacy nor the Alliance had considered. The battle that followed would later be recorded in the annals of both civilizations as the Battle of the Nexus. The day three distinct powers united against a common threat. Human ships moved with surprising agility for their size, their weapon systems confounding the scavenger vessels whose adaptive shields seemed designed to counter known Confederate and Phyrexian technology. The humans' unpredictable attack patterns and unfamiliar energy signatures gave them a crucial advantage. On the main bridge of the Eternal Vigilance, Osiris found himself working alongside Captain Riker as they coordinated the defense fleet. Your tactical systems are impressive, Osiris admitted as they watched a squadron of human fighters execute a maneuver that should have been physically impossible. But your pilots, they take risks no sensible commander would authorize. Riker smiled grimly. That's humanity's greatest strength, Admiral. We've spent most of our history taking risks no sensible species would consider. Sometimes it kills us. Sometimes it propels us forward in ways that defy explanation. A massive explosion rocked the viewport as one of the scavenger capital ships detonated, caught between Confederate plasma torpedoes and a new type of missile from the human vessels, a weapon that seemed to bend space itself around its target. We've cleared a path to the gateway, Commander Chang reported from her temporary station. But the scavengers have already begun some kind of extraction process. They're tapping directly into the gateway's power core. Tactical displays showed energy readings from the ancient structure spiking dangerously. The Nexus Gateway, a marvel of engineering that had stood for tens of thousands of years, was starting to break apart at its seams, threads of blinding energy escaping from widening cracks in its superstructure. We're out of time, Riker said quietly. Commander Cheng, signal the Thermopylae. Tell them to proceed with Operation Firebreak. Osiris noticed something pass between the two humans, a look of shared knowledge and grim determination. Captain, he said slowly, what is Operation Firebreak? For the first time since their meeting began, Riker seemed hesitant. A contingency plan. The scavengers are attempting to extract the gateway's core, presumably to study it or weaponize it. We can't allow that. You plan to destroy the gateway? Vilax asked incredulously, joining them on the bridge. That would trigger the very cataclysm we're trying to prevent. Not destroy, Riker corrected. Contain and stabilize. But it requires direct intervention. On the tactical display, one of the larger human vessels, designated as the Thermopylae, broke from the defensive formation and accelerated toward the gateway, pushing its engines far beyond what should have been possible. Scavenger ships converged on it, but the human vessel's defenses held as it plowed through their lines. That ship, Cheng explained, her voice carefully controlled, contains a specially designed containment chamber. It can absorb and neutralize the energy from the gateway's core, preventing a cascading failure across the network. At what cost? Osiris asked, something in her tone warning him that there was more to this plan. Riker's face was a mask of controlled emotion. The process will destroy the ship and everyone aboard her. They're volunteers. Admiral, they understand the mission. Xeris felt a cold shock run through his system. You're sacrificing your own people to save billions more. Riker's eyes met his unflinchingly. Yes, without hesitation. As they watched, the Thermopylae positioned itself directly within the fractured superstructure of the ancient gateway. Scavenger ships continued their assault, but too late, the human vessel had already begun the containment procedure. The view screen automatically dimmed as blinding energy erupted from the gateway, enveloping the Thermopylae completely. For a terrible moment, it seemed as though the human gambit had failed. Then, gradually, the wild energies began to coalesce, drawn into the ship itself through technology beyond Confederate understanding. It's working, Chang reported, her voice thick with emotion. Core instability is reducing. The network is stabilizing. The remaining scavenger vessels, perhaps realizing their prize was lost, began retreating into the same subspace rifts from which they had emerged. Confederate and Phyrexian ships, following a battle plan hastily created by human tacticians, pursued them to ensure they couldn't regroup. In the sudden calm that followed, Cirrus turned to Riker. The human captain stood rigid, watching as the Thermopylae signal gradually faded from their sensors. There was grief in his eyes, but also pride. Emotions Xeris found he could understand despite the vast differences between their species. How many? Xeris asked quietly. 327 crew members, Riker answered, under the command of Captain Sarah Chen, one of our finest officers. Their sacrifice has saved not only your civilizations, but potentially our own as well. Vilax, who had remained silent, finally spoke. Why? Why would your people, your captain, sacrifice themselves for species they've never even met? Riker turned to the Phyrexian commander. Because that's what humanity does, Commander. We protect our own, yes, but we also recognize that some principles transcend species boundaries. Some actions are right simply because they're right. As the three commanders stood together on the bridge, watching the gateway slowly begin to repair itself through ancient automated systems, Xeris realized they were witnessing something more significant than a military victory. They were witnessing the birth of a new era in galactic politics. Humanity had arrived, and they had announced their presence not with conquest, but with sacrifice. The Ascension Protocol. 3 days after the Battle of the Nexus, an unprecedented gathering convened in the ancient Hall of Concord on neutral territory, a space station that had once served as the center of commerce between the Confederacy and the Alliance, before war had turned it into an abandoned relic. Now, it hummed with activity once more as representatives from 3 distinct civilizations filled its chambers. Captain James Riker stood at the observation deck, gazing out at the stars. His dress uniform felt unusually stiff and formal compared to his standard attire. Behind him, Commander Cheng approached, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The diplomatic corps has finished setting up, she reported. Representatives from 17 Confederate worlds and 22 Alliance systems are present, plus our delegation, of course. Riker nodded, his eyes still fixed on the distant stars. And the gateway? Stabilized completely. The sacrifice of the Thermopylae worked exactly as intended. In fact, our scientists report that the containment process actually strengthened the gateway's structural integrity. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. They didn't die for nothing, James. They never would have, he replied softly, finally turning to face her. Sarah knew what she was doing. She always did. A moment of silence passed between them, honoring memories of their fallen comrades. Then Riker straightened, his expression becoming the composed mask of command that his crew had come to respect. What about our other matter? He asked. Confirmed, Cheng answered, her voice dropping to ensure privacy despite the empty observation deck. The data package recovered from the scavenger command ship proves our theory. They weren't random opportunists. They were sent. By whom? We're still decrypting much of it, But the preliminary analysis suggests a civilization far beyond the rim of charted space, a civilization that's been manipulating both the Confederacy and the Alliance for centuries, pushing them toward conflict. The scavengers were sent to harvest the Gateway's technology once both sides had weakened each other sufficiently. Riker's jaw tightened, so our suspicions were correct. This war was engineered. Not entirely, Cheng clarified. The historical tensions between these species were real. This outside force merely exacerbated them, nudged them in certain directions at critical moments. Classic divide and conquer. A soft chime interrupted them, indicating the diplomatic conference was ready to begin. Riker nodded to Cheng, and together they made their way through the station's grand corridors toward the central chamber. The Hall of Concord lived up to its ancient reputation. Constructed in an era when the Confederacy and Alliance had been trading partners, its architecture incorporated elements from both civilizations. The organic, flowing designs of Confederate aesthetics merged seamlessly with the crystalline precision favored by Grexians. The chamber itself was a massive amphitheater, with representatives seated in concentric circles around a central platform. As Riker and Cheng entered, conversations quieted. All eyes, whether compound, crystalline, or mammalian, turned to observe the humans. Though most had now seen images of humanity, few had encountered them in person. Curious whispers followed their progress to the central platform, where High Admiral Xeris and Supreme Commander Vilax already waited. Captain Riker, Xeris greeted formally, his crest displaying the colors of ceremonial respect. The combined council is assembled. Are you prepared to address them? I am, Riker confirmed, surveying the gathered representatives. Some showed clear signs of distrust, expected given humanity's sudden appearance. Others displayed curiosity or cautious optimism. All would need to be convinced if his mission was to succeed. Addressing an assembly of alien dignitaries had never been part of his training at Earth's Space Command Academy, but recent events had required everyone to adapt quickly. He stepped forward, activated the universal translator at his collar, and began. Representatives of the Galactic Confederacy and the Vrexian Alliance, I stand before you as humanity's envoy in what we hope will be remembered as a turning point in our shared histories. 3 days ago, our civilizations fought together against a common enemy. Today, I must inform you that the threat we faced was merely a symptom of a greater danger, one that affects us all. Murmurs swept through the assembly as Riker gestured to Commander Cheng, who activated a holographic display. Images of recovered data fragments from the scavenger vessels appeared, along with translation matrices. Evidence recovered from the scavenger command ship confirms what our intelligence had long suspected. The century-long conflict between your civilizations has been influenced by an outside force. An advanced civilization beyond the galactic rim has been systematically working to weaken both your peoples, exploiting historical grievances and manufacturing new ones. The chamber erupted in overlapping voices as representatives demanded explanations, evidence, and assurances. Xeris raised a hand, and gradually silence returned. These are extraordinary claims, Captain, Vilax stated, his crystalline features refracting light as he studied the presented data. What would be the purpose of such manipulation? Resources, technology, territory, the usual motivations for conquest, Riker answered. But their methods suggest patience beyond anything our civilizations typically demonstrate. They've been working on this plan for centuries, perhaps millennia. And humanity, asked a Confederate counselor from the inner circle. How do we know you're not agents of this same mysterious force? Your appearance at our moment of greatest vulnerability seems suspiciously convenient. A fair question, one Riker had anticipated. Humanity discovered evidence of this manipulation 30 years ago, when we first decoded transmissions passing through our dormant gateway. We've spent the intervening time preparing, not just technologically, but diplomatically. We needed to understand the situation fully before making contact. You could have warned us, Xeris pointed out. Would you have believed a message from an unknown species claiming your ancient enemy was being manipulated by an even more distant threat? Riker countered. We needed to establish credibility first, which unfortunately required waiting for a crisis that would accept our intervention. The debate continued for hours, with questions about human intentions, capabilities, and evidence dominating the discussion. Gradually, however, the tone shifted from suspicion to cautious consideration as the logic of Riker's arguments and the data provided by Commander Cheng's team proved difficult to dismiss. Finally, Villax raised a question that silenced the chamber. What do you propose we do with this information, Captain? Our civilizations have been at war for generations. Even if external forces influenced us, the blood spilled cannot be forgotten. Riker nodded solemnly. We don't expect instant peace or unity. What we propose is a temporary alliance, a coalition focused specifically on investigating and countering this external threat. Your people can continue working through your differences, but do so while standing together against a common enemy. And humanity's role in this coalition? Xeris asked. We offer our technology, our perspective, and our commitment to defending this sector of space, which now includes our home. Riker gestured to the starfield visible through the chamber's massive windows. We don't seek to dominate or control. We seek partnership. A Vrexian scientist from the outer circle stood, indicating her desire to speak. When acknowledged, she addressed her question directly to Commander Cheng. The technology your vessel used to contain the gateway reaction. It's beyond anything our science has achieved. Are you offering to share such advancements? Cheng glanced at Riker, who nodded slightly. Yes, she answered, with appropriate safeguards. Humanity has developed along a different technological path than either of your civilizations. We've focused on certain areas that you've overlooked, just as you've mastered sciences we're still struggling to understand. Together, our knowledge bases complement each other remarkably well. As the discussion turned to practical matters of cooperation and information sharing, Riker felt the mood in the chamber shifting tangibly. Centuries of distrust wouldn't vanish overnight, but the foundation for something new was being laid. A foundation built on the sacrifice of the Thermopyla's crew and the shared experience of fighting together against the scavengers. Hours later, as the formal proceedings concluded with the signing of a preliminary cooperation agreement, Riker found himself once again on the observation deck. This time, however, he wasn't alone. Xeris joined him, his tall form casting a long shadow in the dim lighting. Your proposal passed with a 70% approval rating, the Confederate Admiral noted, higher than any joint initiative in the last century. Fear is a powerful motivator, Riker observed. As is hope, Xeris countered. You offered both today. He turned to study the human captain more carefully. There's something you didn't share with the Assembly, isn't there, about this external threat? Riker considered denying it, then decided against deception. Trust would be essential moving forward. Yes, our long-range probes detected something massive assembling beyond the galactic rim. We believe it's a fleet, larger than anything your civilizations or mine have ever built. How long? Before they arrive, based on current trajectories, perhaps 5 years, maybe less. Xeris's crest flattened against his skull, a sign of deep concern. Then we have very little time to prepare. We have enough, Riker said with quiet confidence. Humanity has faced extinction-level threats before, Admiral. We've learned that when the odds seem impossible, that's when we perform at our best. The alien admiral made a sound that might have been skepticism. Your optimism is either your species' greatest strength or a dangerous delusion. Probably both, Riker admitted with a slight smile. But there's something you should understand about humans, Admiral. Throughout our history, whenever we've faced overwhelming odds or impossible challenges, we've found ways to overcome them. Not through superior strength or technology, but through cooperation, innovation, and sheer determination. He gestured toward the stars visible beyond the viewport. 5 years ago, humanity was confined to a single star system, just beginning to explore our neighboring planets. Now we stand here, billions of light years from Earth, forging alliances with civilizations that have existed for millennia. If we can accomplish that in 5 years, imagine what all 3 of our peoples can accomplish together in the next 5. For the first time since they'd met, Xerxes' expression showed something that looked remarkably like hope. Besides, Riker added, turning back toward the vast expanse of space, we've activated the Ascension Protocol. What is that? A contingency plan developed by Earth's unified governments. If we're facing an existential threat, we discard all restrictions on technological development and resource allocation. Every scientist, every engineer, every resource, all directed toward survival. His voice took on a hardness that surprised the Admiral. Humanity spent most of its history fighting itself. Now that we've found a worthy adversary, you might be surprised at what we're capable of. As they stood together, watching distant stars shimmer against the blackness of space, a new understanding formed between them, between their species. Whatever came from beyond the rim would not find easy prey, but civilizations united, prepared and guided by humanity's unique perspective. The unthinkable arrival of a human warship had changed everything, and the galaxy would never be the same. End.